Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CBI at 10. I was just saying to Tony Danker, the Director General of the CBI, that it's hard to believe we're only in the second working of January. This new year has certainly crept up on us pretty quickly. I wanted to say, if you look at the screen now, you'll be probably like me a little embarrassed that we are now three white men meeting at the beginning of a conversation about business and the economy in the beginning of 2021. I have to say that falls largely on me, in that what we said we'd do with the CBI at the start was we'd make sure that we always had a proper mix of people, and so you'll see that from Tortoise's end, we're hosting these sessions with the CBI. We're going to change the mix of people through the course of the year. So don't think we go into this unaware of it. We are making sure that this is something that we fix and change. And I know it's a priority for the CBI. You saw it with Carolyn, you see it with Tony, a real determination to make sure that the voices of business are different as we go into 2021. So I want to make sure that's the case, but I also want to say that we're very lucky to have Phillip Jansen, the Chief Executive of BT, and having you here, Phillip, means that we can talk about a business that is such an essential service to quite so many people. I'm sitting here, I've got a couple of my two children upstairs homeschooling. We are reliant in so many ways on your networks. So we really appreciate the chance to talk to you. Phillip, you'll know the drill a little with this. Will you forgive me at the top if I just want to do a quick trip around the houses with Tony on the latest conversations he's had with government and business on COVID? And Tony, do you want to just give us a run through of the discussions you had, Friday and through the weekend?
Yeah, look, it's been a very busy back to work. In the last week, I've spoken to the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the Business Secretary, the new Business Secretary, the Trade Secretary. I've had a long session with Dido Harding as well. So we're certainly back. And of course, look, the big news after we last spoke last week was obviously the lockdown. And we're particularly focused, obviously, on the economic effects. Look, obviously, it is essential to put health first. We're in a situation now in the country of real emergency, and I would just urge all business leaders. I know they don't need the reminder. The health of the nation comes first. It's going to be a particularly difficult time because we've got kids off school as well. So, and I know you'll come on to this with Phillip as well, James, and it's great to have Phillip here, by the way, but it feels a bit like Groundhog Day. And my hope is that this time we know how to do this, right? So we need to be incredibly urgent and attentive to it, but we know how to do this. We've seen this before, just in terms of where we are as a country. Look, the economic hit is real, right? We can't forget, that the restrictions mean demand in the economy falls again. If you're a high street or a physical business, footfall goes again. All the recovery measures around getting business investment going, those go backwards. So it's a real economic hit as well. And look, we've asked the Chancellor and the government to look at three things in particular when it comes to economic support. Now, the Chancellor did come out last week with some grant support immediately, which was good, but I don't think it's going to be enough. And I think, message number one is we can't really wait to the budget at the start of March to deal with a cliff edge at the end of April, because every business in the country is going to take decisions in the next few weeks about the months and years ahead. They're not going to wait to the last minute to deal with that cliff edge problem. So we've said, number one, let's really tackle cash flow. Chancellor's done a bit of that with grants, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough for most businesses. And so whether or not it's dealing with taxes or other payments, VAT, we need to do more to get at cash flow. We know that 30% of businesses run out of money. They've got about 3 months money, best case. So, and every month you're open and losing money, you're losing money. So cash flow is king. We need to keep an eye on cash flow. The second thing is, look, again, we know from last year, there are coverage gaps. there are businesses that don't really get the help. And the thing I think we missed last year was supply chains. So, we were very attentive to hospitality businesses. Those businesses also extend to the food and drink manufacturers that support them. We know about airlines and airports, but there are thousands of people in the aviation supply chain. And so really the main message we landed last week when it comes to economic support was essentially stay the duration. The whole purpose of the economic package was to protect the viability businesses and build a bridge to the other side. We need to finish the job. So we've said we need to extend furlough for another quarter, and we need to look at both the VAT and the business rate cliff edge at the end of April and do something about it. And so this week we're going to be submitting our budget proposal for the Treasury. The Treasury wants submissions for the budget, but the main message is going to be we cannot wait to the budget to put in place the economic measures needed. We need to finish the bits of the bridge, so to speak, to the other side, and we can't wait to March to do that. So that's where we are on the economics of support in response to the lockdown.
And Tony, sorry, just on that, because people will be really interested in extension of furlough to the end of June, some kind of understanding, let's put it this way, on taxes and VAT. And when you talk about the kind of gaps in the coverage, one of the big issues is around small business and self-employed. When you've spoken to the Chancellor and the Treasury, do you get a sense that they're sympathetic to that, or are they really determined to hold on until the first week of March in the budget?
Well, look, I think they are attentive to people that need the most support. So, for example, the furlough scheme is mostly being used now by small businesses, not the largest companies. I think they are attentive to that, and they're trying to get at it. And you can see by virtue of them immediately coming out with a grant offer, I think that is a recognition that everybody's cash flow scenario is different, and therefore the best thing to do is to put money in people's hands. I think probably they were hoping and are hoping to do things at the budget. I think they're also, the government we know, and Philip and I were both on a call with the Prime Minister last week, the government is very hopeful that vaccine impact really gets felt from the end of February. But I think the business realities of that trickling down into being a total reopening of the economy take much longer. And so that is the discussion we're having with the Treasury at the moment. They are listening. We're speaking to them again today. And so I hope we will get action before the budget. I think we need it.
Okay, Tony, thanks. Can you tell us about the conversation with Dido Harding?
Yeah, I had a really good conversation with Dido on Friday. And of course, we're now also so focused on vaccine. Test and trace is out of the news, but Dido and the team have been working really hard and hitting some pretty big numbers, I have to say, to their great credit over the Christmas period. Dido was really keen. I'll just turn to my notes from the meeting. She was really keen to talk about what the test and trace priorities were in the months ahead. And by the way, Dido has kindly agreed to come and do one of these webinars in the next couple of weeks with us again. And I think she'll have more to say because they're really looking at workplace testing. But just to share with you the things that she shared with me, first of all, very focused on continuous improvement in test and trace. So and tracking the things we all know. They've been working really hard on, including contact tracing and using local, how do you use local people to get to the people that are hardest to reach. They're continuing to go on that. Secondly, and we saw this over the weekend, she gave me a heads up on Friday, the rolling out of community testing for asymptomatic people, particularly those people, and they're prioritizing people who have to leave home to go to work. So you're going to see over time now much more asymptomatic testing across the country, as we saw in Liverpool, with a prioritization of people that need physically to go to work. The third thing is, I think they recognize the need for financial support for self-isolation for those people that need it most. And they're working with the DH and with Treasury on that in particular, because they know that's a big part of this. The fourth one is they're already planning for an end to lockdown. So they want to use the next sort of 4 or 5 weeks to make sure that that harmonization between vaccination and continuous test and trace is in place. As Dido puts it, we're still going to have clusters of infection. It's absolutely right. We've got the order of vaccination that we do. The test and trace is going to be absolutely essential for outstanding clusters of infection. And then also the thing that she mentioned that I thought was particularly interesting is the data they've learned about the spread of the virus and how that data can feed in to judgments about tiering. We're going to be going back to tiering. And I think Test and Trace have got an awful lot of data that they're starting to really mine to inform those decisions. So I'm very happy to go into that, but Dido's going to be with us in the next couple of weeks. And I think in particular, she's going to want to talk about workplace testing, which of course will be of most interest to members.
Tony, let's get into that. I'm sure we're going to want to get into testing in the conversation with Philip too. Philip, one of the things that's been best about these conversations since they began in March has been that business of hearing from people like you, but also hearing from CBI members. So you'll get some questions from me, but I'm also going to try and weave in the questions and points that people on the call are making. In that spirit, I should just say, Tony, even as you were talking, there are a bunch of questions about, and possibly these come for Dido Harding, are about whether or not there's an expectation now of testing for people who are working in the same units and areas. A note to you just about C-bills and whether or not they're going to be acceptable delays on repayments, and a note to you too, just to make the case for extension of business rates, as particularly in the hospitality and food sectors. But those all kind of came at you rat-tat-tat as you were speaking. Philip, can we start actually with a note that Tony kicked off on, which is sort of the way in which you're talking to the people who work with you? Because I think pretty much everyone on this call will have this same sense that it's a here we go again moment. It's the third time round. And I just wondered, in an organisation the scale of BT, how you motivate the organisation and meet the customer needs and keep an eye on the longer term as we get into, this hopefully the third and final part of the trilogy.
Yeah, well, morning everybody. Well, I'm delighted to be with you. Yeah, look, I think everybody recognises it's another very, very challenging time. As you say, we're into the third wave of lockdowns, and this one comes on the back of a long period of time of operating in a certain way. So there is, firstly, I think we've got to recognise there's a lot of fatigue within the organisation, within BT, but I'm sure that's true of every organisation. So we've got 120,000 people. They're tired, right? And they're tired, and they are bored with the mode of operating, which is very one-dimensional and lacks the interaction of humans in the way that we used to. So we've got to recognize where we are. So things are the same, but things are different. So they're same in the restrictions, but they're different in that people are tired and they are finding it very, very hard. And they've worked incredibly hard at BT over the last year as we've sort of faced into the pandemic. So how we've handled it is we've got we had from the very beginning sort of rallying cry, which was stand by our colleagues, stand by our customers, and stand by our country. And we got 30 million customers, as I say, 120,000 people. And actually, all the evidence is that those people, the 120,000 people, have done a fantastic job. And that's the most encouraging thing, and that's the most helpful thing, is that everybody feels in BT that we're making a difference to the national challenge of this pandemic. And that's something that has been very, very powerful for BT. But I have to tell you, the metrics on how tired our people are, how stressed they are, how mentally challenged they are from a mental health point of view, it's very, very stark. So we've thrown more help on that side of things to people, really encouraging them to think about, well, now it's more controlled, and we're not in panic mode or crisis mode in the same way that where everything was uncertain. Put yourself first, look after yourself. What do you need? Children at home, schooling, loved ones shielding, get that sorted. But and our principle has always been communicate with your leaders and your teams, and we'll all be there for each other. It's been extraordinary. So I would suspect that the vast majority, 99% plus of BT employees would say, I hope, I've been able to do what I need to do for my family and loved ones. But I have to talk to my manager and my boss and my team to make sure we could work around it, because we've got to keep the country connected. And that combination has worked really well for us. And I have to say a massive thank you to all our staff. I mean, you know this, James and Tony, we operate across all the sectors of the country, from the public health area to MOD, police, education, and our teams have done a fantastic job for small businesses and large businesses and the 30 million homes we've got.
Sorry, I muted myself. There you are. The cardinal error of 2020 continues for 2021. Do you do well, just out of interest, Philip, what do you do? We had a session, I won't say whom, was a very senior Labour Party politician who said he got up every hour and did jumping jacks to the sound of Bob Marley. I just wondered, is there anything that you do in particular? Because it's easy to say that as the chief exec, to say put yourself first, but you actually need to show people what you do and how you do it. So what's your regime?
Well, I tell you what, I have always done exercise, so I try and do exercise every single day in some shape or form. I fell into the trap, like many of us, of doing back-to-back video calls all day, every day, and there's a big change. So I've told people stop doing that, and I've stopped doing it. So there are occasions I have to do it, but there are very few days where I start at 8 and finish at 8 on back-to-back videos. So I've reincorporated phone calls. And I've reincorporated just ad hoc stuff, because this is really tiring for everybody. It's a different type of challenge. So I encourage people to find their way of doing it, but I don't allow myself to sit in this seat all day non-stop for 5 or 6 days a week, which I did do at the beginning, and I felt I had to, but I found it became a routine. So I have changed quite a lot what I do, because I found it very difficult. I have seen myself feeling almost sort of the sort of squeeze of the lockdown. I can physically feel it as I'm working, so I guard against it, and I actually physically fight against it. And I tell my people that's what I do.
Right. Okay. Well, tell me. I'd love to hear a little bit about. You talked about colleagues, customers, and country. Can we talk a bit about customers, right?
Yeah.
Because I suppose people are really interested to hear from where you sit, Philip. What are you seeing in terms of, as you say, consumers and families, but also business customers, small business customers, what they need now from BT and how the way they're working is changing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you say, there's a number of different types of segments. Do the households and consumers first. Roughly 30 million of those rely on BT, and obviously the way in which the home or indeed mobile usage has changed is dramatic, and by definition, people are online so much more, doing so many different things. So not just working, schooling at home, all the things that we know about. So we've had to make sure we've been able to deal with the jump in capacity, and roughly it's doubled. So people are using, double the amount of data on our network, and unfortunately we were well prepared for that, and we had to make a few changes. So that's the first thing. But that's, again, the household. That core connectivity is so important. So when it goes down and when things go wrong, and they always do with technology, by the way, it never works smoothly all the time. So being able to respond to customer challenges is really, really important. And we've done that again well. We were a bit lucky in that we made a move about a year and a half ago to move everything back to the UK for customer care. So all our people, we could get our arms around them in the UK for UK customer support and customer care. And so we've been lucky on that front. So the metrics on customer service and net promoter score have actually gone up considerably on consumers and households, because they've had the data. Sorry, James.
So can I just one thing about that doubling of data usage in the consumer segment? It's amazing. I know when you say it sort of briskly, and we've kind of taken for granted that that's possible. But in my household, we probably did one video streaming call an hour, maximum a day. We're now doing 3 at the same time, probably for 6 to 8 hours a day. Yeah. What does that mean, Philip, in terms of the next 5 years on the consumer side, in terms of future capacity? Have we used up all of the excess capacity that existed within the BT network, or does this mean we can rapidly accelerate the Internet of Things and further data usage in the consumer sector?
I mean, James, is a great question, because it talks to what's the future going to be like in terms of technology. And I think, my personal view is there's going to be devices and sensors everywhere in 10 years' time, and we're going to need a load more capacity in network deliverability, and that is full fiber, and that's 5G, and that's what we're investing in, because we just made it this time around. So that doubling, the reason we were able to do it was we build for peaks. Okay, so we had a build of peaks, and therefore we've always got a buffer. So and I think we put more buffer than most, because we want to make sure we're able to deliver. It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's the basic principle. So I think we need to build the digital infrastructure now for the future. And it's not just about consumers, it's about businesses, because businesses are going to have to take advantage of the new technology, and new businesses, new ideas coming from this increase in capacity. So it's a big challenge for BT, because remember, we've had to put quite a lot of cost in actually to make this happen over the years. And our revenue model, it doesn't change, right? So there's a big challenge there for our business going forward. But for customers, they will need full fiber and they will need 5G, but they probably don't necessarily all need it right now, but it's coming.
Right, and then can we just talk about the business customers and what you're seeing in changes in their usage?
Yeah, I mean, again, they split into sort of a couple of types. I mean, the very large businesses, what we did for the very large businesses was help them all around the world, and we're in 180 countries. The likes of, you know, Unilever, Lloyds Bank, for example, is to help them securely work from home or in a very distributed fashion. That's a real challenge for all of us. We've done it. I mean, it's been amazing that everyone's done it, but it also, you know, the legislature, you know, court cases are now being done over video, so that has to be done securely. So we've had to put up, you know, VPNs, virtual private networks, proper secure collaboration tools for everybody. So that's one, and that was done very quickly, as we all know, and done very, very well. Again, tremendous teamwork with some big providers like Microsoft and Google and various others. But then you've got the sort of SME part, and there are 5 million odd plus, I think it's 5.8 million SMEs in the UK. We've got 1 million of those as customers directly with us, and then a few others through OpenReach and other people. And that's where, you know, we've seen this sort of change where there has been this massive spike of people going more onto online e-commerce, and this major leap in e-commerce that's happened over the last year. And I think we've had a sort of a decade's worth of e-commerce growth in less than a year. And so SMEs and businesses have had to adapt and get more online. And you can see that in just the delivery of food, for example. A number of places that have gone online ordering and deliveries has changed dramatically. So there's lots of examples like that. So for each different segment, we've had to be there. And then, you know, the government segment's really important. We had to connect, from a BT perspective, all the new Nightingale hospitals, of course. But, you know, we've had a product called Lifeline. I mean, it's very, very sad in some of these places, where, as you know, where loved ones cannot speak to their dying relatives. We've developed a technology whereby at least they can talk on a proper video link like this, and put the tablets right next to the people in the ward, or indeed the room where people are, where their lives are ending. I mean, it's so, we've had done so many different things for people. And the final thing I'd say from a BT point of view is again, connecting the sort of national crusade, you know, giving those people who need assistance, vulnerable customers, unlimited data on their broadband connections. For healthcare workers, giving them unlimited data on EE. So if you're a healthcare worker for the NHS and you're on EE, you can have unlimited data, so that you're not having to worry about that at all. And various other things we've done for SMEs. We've done lots of things for SMEs too, to help them get more digital skills and more online.
Philip, can I ask you about that? Actually, I'd like to ask Tony too. I suppose there are two big things that people think about as regards business in the light of the pandemic. One is around competitiveness, how it changes the structure of business and the way the UK competes in the world. And the other is about inequality. And they're both, if you like, brought together by the issue of connectivity. I wondered whether, Philip, you'd just talk a little bit. Obviously, you can imagine there have already been some people, as you were talking, asking questions about rural broadband. For example, one person asked about the Southwest, but I know it's there is, to use Tony's phrase, there are gaps of coverage, there are issues in that, and they're geographical, but they're also social and economic. And I wondered how this last year has changed your thinking around the inequality of coverage and connectivity issue.
Yeah, James, it's a really good question. I think this is one of the big fundamental questions we're all facing as we come out of the pandemic. So I think it's, you know, obviously we've got a tough time right now. Let's all hope the vaccine works, and come sort of the spring, we're all out of it. You know, certainly in the summer, that part's behind us. We've then got a real challenge of what's changed and what's going to happen post that from an economic, societal point of view. And I think if you look carefully at what's happened, you've got to look at how the markets see the world. Look at what's happened to the big tech companies. Their valuations have skyrocketed. And what that's telling you is people are saying that they're going to win even more so in the next 10 years. And they are. The question is, I think, unfortunately, what's happened in the last year, despite us all doing as well as we could have done in very difficult circumstances that no one wanted, this fragmentation or diversity or dispersion has increased everywhere. So large tech's getting stronger. Other businesses that are less digital, less tech savvy are getting weaker. E-commerce is growing. If you're pure retail, you're under more of a challenge. Well, you're already under challenge, but now it's even more so. The social divide is widening. The economic divide is widening. The educational divide is widening. That is a massive challenge for the UK. And it's not just the UK. I know it's happening almost everywhere. So I think BT has a very important role to play, because connectivity and communication are at the heart of this. So again, I spend a lot of my time, as Tony knows, debating and talking to government and policy leaders and regulators on how we do this, because I want to build in rural areas right now, but the circumstances are not appropriate for me to do that at the level that I'd like to do it, and that is crazy. And the same is true, and there are macro points on we should be building full fiber everywhere right now. We should be building 5G as fast as we possibly can everywhere right now, but we're not as an industry. And there are reasons for that. And it's very, very frustrating that we're not doing those things, because those are no-brainers in my view, and they will set up the chance of preventing this dispersion or diversion or divergence economically, societally, community-wise that I'd like to, what I know you would as well.
I'm going to come back to you on that, Philip, but I can see Tony's going to jump in. Tony.
Well, it was really interesting as Philip was talking. I think there are two things to, digitally enable British business. The first is capacity, and Philip's spoken to that. And the other is capability. And I think the great hope has to be that the experience we've all had in the last 9 months should have, and I know has really opened up capability, because, in my last job, I spent loads of time with small businesses up and down the country who were, tech scared, frankly. And over the last 9 months, all of us, even if you were a laggard, have had to get incredibly tech savvy in our personal interactions, in our business interactions. We've had to use cloud-based systems to track people, to run things. As Philip said, huge uptake in e-commerce. And, I guess message for anybody on the call who's not as, tech capable or as tech enabled as their business should be, now is the time. Right? Hopefully, one of the positive springboards that comes of the crisis is mass digital enablement of British business. To achieve that fully, Philip's right, we need capacity and capability. But, if you are looking at your business plan for the year ahead, you better have tech enablement in there. And it will include systems, it will include skills, not only workforce skills, which we talk about a lot, but your own skills as a manager, in order to really, create a higher floor of digital capability for your business. Because as Philip said, it's going to be the story of the next 10 years.
But can we just get into the weeds of if you're Chris Ormerod in the Southwest, slightly tearing your hair out about rural broadband, Philip, what is the story about why we're finding it so hard to reach fibre everywhere? And I appreciate we're going to get your view, BT's view, but there's a divide, isn't there? There's either people saying the government's small-minded, they're not putting enough money into subsidise uneconomic lines and networks, or there's the view that actually companies like BT are only willing to operate in areas where there's a significant margin, and therefore excluding pockets of the country. So can you just help us understand what the problem is here and what the fix is?
Yeah, frankly, I think the problem is, again, it's my personal view, is as a group, and I mean industry, policymakers, government, and regulators, I still think we're looking a little bit backward and a little bit through the historical lens, which is sort of regulating telecom companies in a way on build. We should be assuming that should just be done. Right, so because we need to be regulating the new things that are coming that we're referring to, AI, data security, privacy, how drones and sensors and all the information that comes from that is used in society. These are massive questions. So I think we should be focusing more of our efforts on that. Whether or not we build in rural shouldn't be a debate, it should just happen. And the reason it's not happened, by the way, is policy and regulation does not encourage it. And that's the sad thing about it is now that hopefully is going to change in the next 3 months. But we've been working on it, and it's just the way in which policy is set up in this country. We've had to wait 2 or 3 years for a regulatory review to stimulate the build in a balanced way in rural and urban. But to be crystal clear, I'm happy to subsidize building in the rural areas where the economics are not very attractive if the circumstances are appropriate. And we're happy to cap our returns, by the way. We don't need to make a fortune. We just need to get on and build it and make a fair return for our shareholders. We shouldn't be making an absolute fortune, to make a good, decent return and get on with it. And that sort of argument hasn't really landed sufficiently well, is the truth.
And what is the, and this is for both you and Tony, and what is the answer to the competitiveness question? Because I think everyone would echo Tony's point, which is that we've seen the potential of a network connected economy, but many people would point to, and you know this better than anyone, Philip, you know, economies like Korea, where actually the broadband rates are just so much faster, and therefore their level of connected economies is just higher and more advanced than ours. What's the answer to that step change in the next decade?
Well, that's sort of my point, James. That's my point. You know, in the places where other countries where they've got the connectivity, it's going to stimulate the connectivity. It's table stakes. It's what Tony's talking about, which is capability. Once it's there, what are we going to do with it and build new businesses, help existing business take advantage of technology and new ideas? But if it's not there, you simply can't do it. And so I'm sort of taking the view that this is a assumptive close. We've just got to find a way of doing it. And I'm hopeful that in the next 3 months, you know, and it is coming to a head in March, April time this year, that the government and Ofcom and us and the whole of the industry come up with a solution that basically, James, delivers a balanced build and allows you to build in the urban areas where passing a home, by the way, is £300 to £400, but also when you can pass a rural home, it might cost £4,000. But remember, they're charged the same amount of money. There has to be some subsidization. And what I'm getting at, I'm happy for us to subsidize urban and rural within BT, but the economics have to make sense in totality. And so unfortunately, it's quite complicated and is linked into regulatory law as well. So, and we're trying to change that.
I think, James, just to add on that.
Just one second. I'm sorry, I don't fully understand that, Philip, because if you say you're willing to pick up the cost of that £4,000 home, what's the changes in regulatory law that you need to make that work?
Well, basically, the regulator's job or frame of reference is to increase investment and competition. And in a business like ours, which is an infrastructure type business, which has natural monopolistic characteristics, all out competition and all out investment means we'll all congregate around the same areas. Because why wouldn't we all build in the places that are low cost to build, densely populated with high value customers? We'll all congregate. We need to find a way where the regulator and the policy makers encourage the whole industry to build in the rural areas. And remember, BT is opening up all its ducks and poles to anybody. So any player can go out there and access our ducks and poles. And my argument is, if they do that in the rural areas, then of course, once they've built in those areas, no one else is going to go there because it's not economic. We've got to find a way where the industry builds in the rural areas, not just BT Openreach, because competitively, we have to right by our shareholders too.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Sorry. You know, I mean, it's interesting listening to you. You suddenly realize you've got railways like, even NHS like problems here, which is how do you make the most of, you know, monopsony provision at the same time as the customer gets the benefits of competition in the market? It's quite a difficult.
One other thing, it's really important, you know, that it's most important that the customer gets the stuff they need. And what we're saying here is the connectivity could be better, should be better, needs to be better. I am absolutely of that point of view. Look at the pricing though. Our pricing around compared to any place around the world, you can get a very, very good broadband connection for 100 megabits per second for less than £1 a day. I mean, that's extraordinary. The prices are double in the US at least. The same with mobile. You get amazing value for money. So we've ticked that box. We now need to make sure that the connectivity and the capability is there now. We need investment for that.
I mean, it's very interesting listening to you, Philip, because I had a conversation with someone in Canada on exactly this subject, where their issue is not around the connectivity, it's around price. Massive public fury around price. Sorry, Tony, I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, regulation and skills are two perennial questions when it comes to competitiveness. And I think, we've talked before, James, about what Britain's going to need in the next decade, which is a piece of work we care deeply about. And I think what Philip alludes to are a couple of things that are relevant, and they're relevant in Philip's world, but they're also relevant across the economy now. One is the role of regulation in incentivizing investment. And it's something that I've raised with the Chancellor, and I know he's attentive to, and will raise with the Business Secretary later today. We're going to need to unlock business investment in order to get the economy going, and we're going to need to unlock business investment in order to win the next decade. So where is our regulatory framework, sector by sector, when it comes to incentivizing the right investment? Because I think that's incredibly important for the country's flourishing in the next 10 years. Secondly, just to say on skills, there's a lot said about digital skills. But in my experience, digital skills and digital adoption go together, right? If you're a business thinking, well, I'm not sure I should adopt more technology because I'm not sure we have the skills. What we know is that people who adopt build skills, right? Those things work together. Of course, people should have some basic digital skills when they come into the workforce, but workforces get digitally smart by using technology. So we need to start thinking about digital skills alongside digital adoption, rather than trying to think about them as a blocker for adoption. So just some thoughts really on the sort of 10 years of digital success in relation to
Tony's so right. We've got this small business support scheme that BT launched about 6 months ago. Been fantastically successful. I mean, we put £3 million into helping people on connectivity and also delayed funding and how they pay for that. But more importantly, the digital skills, the response on digital skills. We do mentoring. Businesses are performing much better if they're using these digital skills. So the capabilities are there, and actually they respond very, very quickly. And we know that in our daily lives, the way in which we're all working now. I mean, look, I love the what's happened in the legislature, courts. I mean, everything was so manual. They were walking around with these folders in cases full of, massive case folders. It's not all, but almost all gone online on videos. You're having court cases on video like this. So there's been massive step change, and it's not that difficult. And so the SMEs and businesses, if the connectivity is there, the capabilities are quick to get.
Can I ask you just two future-facing questions? I'm aware we've only got about 5 minutes left, Philip, and I wanted just to talk about two big sort of questions around the future for a company of your scale. The odd thing about what's happened in the markets is, there have been some people, particularly in the financial markets, who've made an enormous amount of money. And what you hear about is that there's large amounts of capital that's accessible, right? And so I wonder for you what the opportunity cost of not accessing more funding is. I think many of us know the sort of debt position of BT and the pressures you face on that front, but what's the risk you're facing in terms of not making big bets in the next decade? And so how does this crisis affect your choices for the strategic direction of BT?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So look, we've got something called Ambition 2030 at BT, which we developed literally it's finalized before the crisis hit in March last year. And actually it stood the test of time in the last 9 months, apart from it just being accelerated. And so there's sort of 3 pillars to that. And the first one is deliver the foundations for the company, and that's modernizing and reinventing BT from within. But the second part of that is building this digital infrastructure we're talking about now. So I've made a massive assumption that we're going to spend about £20 billion in the next 4 or 5 years building the digital infrastructure. And what we need to do on that is make the sort of fair returns that we talked about on the infrastructure side. But remember, we've got massive retail businesses. Okay, so we've got a retail business dealing with consumers and homes. We're the #1 mobile operator in the UK. We have a huge business providing connectivity and more to businesses and the public sector. And then we offer, to global businesses around the world, 180 countries, connectivity and distributed working, all the things we talked about before. So the next stage is making the most of what that technology and infrastructure brings, and it's all about software-driven activity, software and digital, and the applications and services that we can deliver. So we're looking at, for example, in Reading, we've got a drone corridor. We're leading a consortium of how drones can be used to help on motorways, smart cities, healthcare. That's going to be a big category, I think, in the future. Healthcare, by definition, massive. Technology today can completely transform healthcare. We all know that. It's just so difficult to get it done. So BT needs to play in those kind of roles. And equally, as I said before, I see drones and sensors and devices everywhere. That is going to drive, and high definition video, that's going to drive data, and how people's data is used in the future is really important. And AI, artificial intelligence, is all about data. And we are a little way behind in the UK versus other countries for all the reasons we know. BT needs to play a big role in helping the country think through that. And to finish, James, I think that to connect the points, we as a country be thinking hard about not whether we do build the digital infrastructure, is how do we put policy in place to invest and regulate and deliver the best outcomes for the new technology that is coming round the corner.
So, and on that was my second question, really, Philip, which is, we saw what happened in the United States last week, and for many people, I think that solidified or vindicated their concerns about the social ills of the digital age, right? The scale of misinformation, the risks of organization online. And look, this problem doesn't normally end up at your door, but if you've seen how fast things have moved in terms of Amazon and Parler and Gab, Jack Dorsey and Twitter, you must begin to think, people are going to ask what data is coming through that BT pipe, and what capacity does BT have, if any, to make sure that homes and businesses are secure, that information is reliable. And I don't know what the answer is, but I imagine it's something that you think about.
We do, James, and this is my point, James. We shouldn't be spending too much time worrying about what rate of return BT makes on digital infrastructure, whether it's 10% or 12%, 11%, it doesn't really matter. We shouldn't make a fortune. To get on with it, because what you're talking about is absolutely essential. And I think most people aren't aware of the kind of cyber world and the deep tech world that's going on under the surface that people can't see. We've got 3,000 people that do nothing else but manage cybersecurity effectively for the nation. And getting our mind around the future of information and data and security and privacy, and how we regulate that stuff. As you say, we've seen it happen last week, but that's just the culmination of many years of the same sort of activity. It's going to get way harder, much harder, because there's going to be so much more information and data out there that people can pull down, steal, use, and bend in a way that, and it's basically down to compute power, and that is going to continue to skyrocket. So I'm arguing, in a post-Brexit world, we as a nation, as business, as technology people, as policymakers and regulators, let's sit together and think about what kind of country do we want in 2030. And that's why I talk about BT's ambition 2030, because if we all had a connected vision, and the environment, for example, is a big part of that, obviously, but technology and security and data and privacy and regulation of that is absolutely fundamental. And we will make a mistake if we don't get on it now. We'll regret it in 10 years' time, and we'll be having a much deeper conversation, more worrying conversation than we're having now.
Phillip Jansen, the Chief Executive of BT, thank you very much. I have Tony smiling, not least because I completely lost track of time because I was too interested in this particular set of problems. problems. But Tony, would you just give us a minute or two just at the end on this week, because there are these long-term issues that Philip just touched on, and there are a lot of people who are really stuck in the here and now.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, how great to have Philip on, both to have Ambition 2030, which is a phrase I'm going to steal, but also thinking really hard about the short run. As for us, actually similar. We're starting our own Ambition 2030 work this week. You know, I've spoken about economic vision before. That's internal. As for the broader context, you know, again, COVID and Brexit. This week we are submitting our submission to the Treasury for the budget, but also for the COVID support needed. So if you haven't already given feedback, please come on the website, the Coronavirus Hub, your usual CBI channels. We're literally gathering lots of feedback right now to feed back into the Treasury this week about support in response to COVID. And secondly, just to mention Brexit, we almost got through a webinar without talking about it. Some of you will know there's a lot going on in that regard. I'm really pleased that on Northern Ireland, we got Michael Gove and the team last week to agree to replicate the task force, but for Northern Ireland. So there'll be a Northern Ireland focused task force. And we'll be pushing again on Brexit this week with some new problems being discovered with the border operating model. And then finally, just in a few hours' time, I'll be talking to Kwasi, the new business secretary, about priorities for the year ahead, both in the long run and right now. So please keep giving us your feedback.
Tony, thank you very much. Philip, thank you very much for your time. Tony, as ever, really good to talk to you. To everyone on the call, have a very good week. See you on Wednesday. Thanks so much.